Having meeting after heavy lunch is really heavy challenge. So mentally, physically, emotionally, and psychologically. So I want to suggest let's organize this session time efficient manner so that we can have a short break before opening. We've got a nice place to walk around, right?
Right.
Okay, so I'd like to ask for your full cooperation in terms of time management.
Yes.
And afternoon session, as you know, we are supposed to discuss very practical issues. Our mission is to collect ideas as many as possible. Of course, not only the number of ideas, but quality ideas, and to improve this guiding principle. Let me introduce once again this guiding principle, page 151 and 52. As I said, this guiding principle, some of you had participated in this workshop or preparatory process. I think it took 2 years to draft and adopt this guiding principle in 2014. One of the key contributors was Date&Time, a well-known person from Thailand. He made a lot of substantial contribution, and also many other participants. And that time, the idea was many people were asking, what does it mean by human rights cities? What constitutes human rights city? And when I was listening to presentation this morning, I realized we have a very different understanding of a human rights city. Sometimes confusing, and sometimes because obviously it's not a question of right or wrong, different context, the Japanese context, Philippine context, Korean context, European. That's why I think we need to so-called level playing field, which means we need to be on the same page before we go into the discussion of human rights cities or local government. Because in Korea also there has been a lot of debate. One of the speakers this morning, Dr. Kang Hyun-soo, he wrote a book about right to the city in Korea. So this right to the city, human rights city, many concepts are now introduced in South Korea, debated now, So generally speaking, when you say the human rights city, there are 4 different approaches. Number one is human rights in the city, which means human rights are recognized nationally, right, or the international. So mechanically implement human rights at the local or city level. Very simple. You don't have to add anything new. Simply, sometimes because the national government are very reluctant or fail to implement the international human rights. So local government voluntarily able to implement internationally recognized human rights at the local level. Very simple. There's a human right in the city. Second one is concept is right of the city. This is the issue of decentralization and local democracy. Unless right or city or local government have a right in terms of budgeting, the finance, and even the community policing, and they cannot guarantee all the human rights recognized by international human rights standards. So, to some, of course, it's not 100% autonomy, but to a certain degree, the city should have a right to govern itself financially and politically. So this issue of the local democracy or decentralization or local autonomy, the second one. Third one is right to the city, which is becoming popular in Europe, some part of Europe, and also Latin America. Right to the city, they reframing the city not as a physical, the spatial concept, it's a more political concept. But this is very controversial, but it's being increasingly recognized by UN. That's why October we have Habitat 3 in Quito. There's a new urban agenda. They already incorporate this concept of right to the city, but still debated at the UN. Some government are against right to the city because they don't want a new right. We have more than enough right, no more new right. And also something is exclusive, only the city, what about rural areas? So there are a lot of conceptual debate, confusion, and so on. So right to the city, nevertheless, can be very useful concept when you address the issue of housing, housing problem or transportation in the urban setting. So right to the city. Last one is human rights-based approach to municipal administration. So human rights-based approach to the city, that means city management or city administration. So when you say the human rights city, these four components, human rights in the city, right of the city, and the right to the city, and human rights based approach to city. So these are the four major components of the human rights city. So when you say the full-fledged human rights city, that means these four components, we should have these four components. Then we can say human rights city, which means we need to have a human rights, the mayor, top political leaders who have a human rights perspective and consciousness, and also we have a human rights friendly policies and institutions, and also human rights culture, human education. But no city in the world is a perfect. So we are moving towards this ideal human rights city in different contexts. For instance, and also Japanese context, Japan is more very, there are a lot of human rights ordinance, but we call specific sectoral ordinance, right?
Yes.
Japan is very good, very go deeper, whether it's children, women, or migrant, elderly, But when you say the human rights city, it's not only the one group of people in communities as a whole, That's what we call the basic human rights approach, comprehensive human rights approach. So that makes the difference. When the human rights city, it's not simply the one group of marginalized or excluded people as a whole. So that makes all the difference. Human rights city and then human rights policy in the city. Because Jeff mentioned about in UN report, all non-declared human rights cities, like Japan. There are many cities who already implemented the human rights policy, but they don't declare themselves as human rights city for political reasons. When you say human rights, it's very political, many countries, even Korea too. I think we need to understand different types of the human rights city, different degree, different level, and different way of this human rights city. Especially the Philippine case, you have a very, and also the National Human Commission Philippines play a very key role because they have a very good grassroots network, National Human Commission. But not in the case of South Korea. South Korea is very centralized. We have a central office in Seoul and a few branches, big cities. So National Human Rights Commission does not really reach to the bottom, village level. But Philippines is different. So Philippine Human Rights Commission, together with the PARA, I believe they can play a key role in spreading out this idea of human rights cities. But in Korea, different, and Indonesia again different. So I think we need to put all the different reality in mind when you discuss this guiding principle for human rights cities and local government and human rights. Okay. So my suggestion is already we have received several the comments, presentations. So I want to give a floor to those who submit the written presentation first, and then I want to go around more panel, the workshop style, because if you look at this guiding principle, the human rights city, so we need to discuss two ways. One is structure of, let's say, as I said, we are informal advisors to advisory committee. Okay, so we have only one person, Professor So Chang. He's officially advisory committee member, but we are all informal advisors. What is our advice? Do you think this format is good enough? This type of 10, very typical, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, and then there's a duty bearer, and then the right holder, this format, very simple. Whether this is good enough, or we need to have a different structure. If we have this as a guiding principle for local government human rights, which means what kind of role local government should play to promote, protect human rights at the local level. This is a key question, right? And then Margaret is not here, but there is a very city charter, human rights city charter. They constitute a charter, duty bearer and office bearer. At the same time, human rights city or local government, there are many actors as we discussed this morning. We have a central government. We cannot implement this one without cooperation with the central government. And also role of UN, UNDP, and also role of local parliament, role of civil society. There are many actors. So are you going to address also what kind of role they need to play to build human rights city together? In addition to this substantive part, this means local. This substantive part means what kind of role local government should play, or different actors. Common framework. At the same time, specific role to play by according to different actors. So this also implication for structure. So first round, I will go around. They invite those who have made the presentation because we need to respect, because they invest the time and energy into this one. So we listen to them first, and then we will discuss first part structure, and second part is content, and then we all put together, and then we move to the next stage. Is okay? Okay, so with your consent, I try to finish within, what time is now? 2 o'clock, right? So we are supposed to finish here 4:30 is opening, at least 4 o'clock, or if possible 3:30. Let's try to finish within 90 minutes. It's okay. So who is going to be your first one? I think again Jeff, right? Jeff is the best student of this class. Very faithfully follow the guideline. Okay, Jeff, you go.
Thank you. How many minutes do I have?
5 minutes. Okay.
5 minutes. Okay. Sure. Okay. Thank you very much. What you see here is not the same as what you can find in the book, because I transferred some of the slides from the first presentation to the second. So you'll see some of them here. The first principle, of course, the question is what do we need to change or add into the guiding principles of 2014? One of the things that I noticed reading the Human Rights Council report is that the definition between human rights city and right to the city is something crucial because it's used in the principle. And I thought that was the Human Rights Council report was much clearer in terms of defining the two. But now you made an introductory remark, so you again clarified the definition. So I think that's a good point. The other thing is that probably it's a question of organizing whatever comes out later on. I would say that we have to look into the principles, including how they are translated into national policies, constitutions, laws, and whatever other forms of policies that you can find in the country, in order to make it much more related to the local context. The mechanisms definitely will have to look into how local governments will be able to do something about their principles and their level. And human rights actors, of course, the local governments, but we also have to think, as you said earlier, there are many other groups involved, and so I just want to focus on the NGOs and local institutions. And here again, I go back to different local institutions, including those in the academe, universities and colleges, those who are already doing something and yet they are not recognized as human rights institutions. And then the other thing which I thought would be important is that this popular participation mechanism should be a clear part of the system. That I think that was raised also in the earlier session, that people should have a stake and be able to express ideas on what they would like to happen in their own locality. So whatever form, consultation, dialogue, feedback system, I think they have to be there. Now this is the one that I was talking about in my earlier presentation, in my earlier PowerPoint, but then not discussed. I would like to emphasize the national and local link, particularly in terms of guidance to the local government, in terms of implementation of whatever plans they have, training of the staff and resources, whatever can be provided, coordination with local offices of national government agencies. In one case, for example, the National Agency on Social Welfare was doing much, much more than the National Human Rights Commission or even the local government because they have the resources. They have the money and the people to do something on the ground, but they may not be coordinating with the local agencies. staff support on the implementation aspect. Maybe there's a need for the national government to send some kind of experts or whatever who can provide some help in implementing projects involving human rights at the local level. Involvement of people with knowledge and skills in human rights, they can be NGO workers, academics, in whatever government planning and implementation is happening. So just to emphasize the national local level. Again, also in relation to the earlier discussions, I think the National Human Rights Commission should be able to provide guide in incorporating human rights projects at the local level, should be able to work with the local government rather than with the national government agencies at the local level because of the sensitivity sometimes of the issue of human rights. Again, same thing with the human rights mechanism. In my view of the situation in Japan, I think there's a need really for training of local government officials. It can become a very bureaucratic process that anyone can be assigned to any human rights office or institution just because the person is a local government official. I think there should be a very clear and proper training of these government officials before they get involved in any human rights work. So this can also be a focus of attention. And also, of course, the reason is because of the misunderstanding of human rights. We do not know what they think about human rights, and they may be working against it instead of supporting it. So it's very crucial that they understand human rights in a proper way. Again, in terms of facilitating people's participation, there should be a way to go about that. In terms of coordinating with government functions, institutions, whether they have explicit or implicit human rights function, that should be looked into to maximize the existing resources at the local level. And then hopefully, of course, there will be a master planner program that covers all services and programs and offices and institutions at the local level. So this is hopefully strengthening local initiatives. Okay, civil society, as we know, they should be there. So basically, the proposal is to have a practical document. We need to guide the local governments on how they can implement create the human rights city or whatever by having a guide on the different aspects of implementing human rights programs, policies at the local level. And again, I refer back to the Ruggie Principles framework because I thought that provided a good example of a document. Now, one thing about the Ruggie Principles is that that didn't come out simply because of Professor Ruggie's ideas. He did that because he consulted so many people and groups and communities, business and what, all over the world in order to come up with that framework. So I think one of the first step, next step maybe, in developing that, whatever, after 2014 document, is a consultation process. A way of getting out the experiences from the ground, from different institutions, from NGOs and what, in order to create a practical document. So, I think that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. So very comprehensive and also very insightful the input about what we are supposed to, where we need to supposed to elaborate, this one. So let's continue. We have 3 more input from Korean experts. So may I call Professor Kim Jung-seok first to give us your
한국말로 하겠습니다. 제가 여기에 기록을 한 것보다 먼저 앞서서 좀 오전 시간에 시간이 쫓겨서 말씀을 제대로 못 드렸는데 이 가이딩 프린시플을 정하는데 굉장히 중요한 경험을 하고 있다고 생각을 해요. 오늘 아침에 인상이. 그것은 광주에서 인권 도시라고 휴먼 라이츠 시티라고 하는 단어를 널리 쓰고 있지만 그래서 전 세계적으로 확산되고 있지만 오늘 아침에 제가 들은 인상으로는 유럽의 경험, 또 미국의 경험, 그리고 또 아시아의 경험, 필리핀, 인도네시아, 일본, 한국 이런 경험들을 다 나눠갖는 것이 굉장히 중요하다고 생각을 해요. 왜 그러냐면 개념을 만들어내는데 개념을 가지고 각 지역에 주입하는 것보다 각 지역의 경험을 이렇게 합쳐지는 개념이 만들어진다는 것이 굉장히 중요하지 않나 이런 생각입니다. 그렇기 때문에 인권 도시라고 하는 개념도 다시 한번 정의를 할 필요가 있고, 인권이라고 하는 것도 어떻게 실행이 되어가는지 그것도 다시 한번 우리가 개념 정의를 하는 것이 필요하지 않는가 하는 생각을 했습니다. 그러기 위해서는 오늘 이 가이딩 프린시플을 논의하는 것도 의미가 있고, 좀 가능하다면 이 짧은 가이딩 프린시플을 만들어내는데 이것으로 모든 걸 다 담기 어렵기 때문에 가이딩 프린시플을 만들어 놓고 그것에 대한 개념 정의와 해설이 좀 이루어진다면, 충분히 각 지역의 사례를 예를 들어가면서 해설이 이루어진다면 훨씬 더 설득력 있는 생산적인 그런 결과물이 나오지 않을까 하는 그런 기대감을 하게 됩니다. 거기에서 오늘 아침에 나온 얘기 중에 중앙정부와 지방정부의 역할에 대한 것이 각 지역의 문화가 다르기 때문에 다르게 이해하는 경향들이 많다고 생각을 합니다. 저는 한국의 경험, 한국을 중심으로 얘기하게 되지만, 또 일본의 경험은 일본은 또 전혀 다르게 전개되고 있고, 또 각 지역의 이제 인권위원회의 역할도 다르고, 이런 것처럼 중앙정부와 지방정부의 역할, 이런 것도 다시 한번 해설을 통해서 논의가 이루어진다면 훨씬 좋은 이 가이딩 프린시플이 훨씬 더 효력을 가지지 않을까, 이펙티브하지 않을까, 뭐 이런 생각을 해봅니다. 현재 쓰인 가이딩 프린시플에 저는 개념을 재정립해야 되겠다고 생각한 것은, 이른바 시티라고 하는 개념이 월반이라고 하는 개념과 같이 가는 것으로 이해하는 경향이 있다고 제가 느꼈습니다. 그런데 월반 하면 지금 안 계시지만 강현수 원장님도 말씀하셨지만 루럴과 대비되는 개념으로 설명을 하게 됩니다. 그렇게 되면 루럴은 휴먼 라이트 시티에는 포함되지 않는 것으로 될 가능성이 있습니다. 그러나 아시아의 많은 지역도, 전 세계의 많은 지역도 루럴 지역이 많이 있습니다. 그렇기 때문에 휴먼 라이트 시티에는, 저는 개념에는 얼반을 강조하기보다는 로컬을 더 강조하는 것이 필요하지 않을까, 로컬 커뮤니티 같은 개념으로 쓰는 것이 더 중요하지 않을까 하는 생각을 해봅니다. 다시 말해서 흩어져 있지만 로컬 정부의, 지방 정부의 그 관할 영역에서의 인권 보장을 어떻게 해줄 것인가. 다시 말해서 인권, 휴먼 라이트 시티, 인권 도시라는 개념이 등장했을 때 출발했던 제일 중요한 관심은 일상생활에서의 인권 보장이거든요. 삶의 현장에서의 인권 보장입니다. 삶의 현장에서의 인권 보장과 일상생활의 인권 보장을 누가 책임질 것인가? 우리 국가에게만 미룰 수 없다 이거죠. 민주주의가 제대로 이루어졌을 때는 지방정부가 더 많은 관심을 가지고 책임을 져야 된다는 겁니다. 그래서 지방정부에게 가이딩 프린시플을 제시하고 지방정부에게 책무를 주게 된다는 거죠. 그렇게 되면 자칫 잘못하면 지방정부에만 책임을 묻는 것처럼 느껴지는데, 그게 아니라 중앙정부와 지방정부가 같이 협력해야 될 내용이다 이런 거죠. 기존의 방식이 인터내셔널, 국제적인 관심, 그리고 국가적인 책무, 이거에 머물러 있는데 이제는 삶의 현장, 일상생활의 현장인 지방에서 책무를 지고 있는 지방정부가 인권을 실행하는 책무를 가지고 있다. 이것을 강조하는 것이 굉장히 중요한 측면이라고 저는 생각을 합니다. 이런 점에서 단순히 얼반으로 나가면은 조금은 좀 우리의 뜻을 다 담아낼 수 없을 것 같다. 차라리 얼반 거버넌스보다 로컬 거버넌스가 낫고, 얼반 커뮤니티보다 로컬 커뮤니티가 낫고, 얼반 컨텍스트보다 로컬 컨텍스트가 낫고, 이렇게 저는 좀 하는 것이 어떨까 하는 생각을 해봤습니다. 그래서 휴먼 라이트 시티라고 하는 개념을 사람들이 어느 일정한 공간에 집합적으로 집중되어 산다는 시티 개념보다는 사람들이 모여 사는 개념이다. 거주는 흩어져 있어도 이 모여 사는 개념에 통할권에 인권을 넣자, 이런 개념으로 휴먼 라이트 시티의 개념을 자꾸 개념 확장을 해가는 것이 필요하지 않을까, 이런 생각을 해봤습니다. 다시 말해서 지자체의 책임을 좀 더 강조하고 로컬 거버넌스를 강조하는 것으로 향해서 갈 때 휴먼 라이트 시티는 생명력을 갖지 않을까 하는 생각을 해봅니다. 이거 아주 지역적인 건데 9번에 나와 있는 내용에는 베이직 서비스에 저는 전에 토론이 이루어진 것 같은데 이게 헬스케어 같은 개념이 빠져 있어서 이런 것도 굉장히 중요한 부분인데 하는 아주 마이너한 거지만 지역적인 거지만 생각을 해봤습니다. 이상입니다. 감사합니다.
고맙습니다. 나중에 한번 모아서 끝장 토론 한번 좀 필요할 것 같아요. I think sometime we need to have a really in-depth discussion all the conceptual debate. So he mentioned about instead of city should not be understood as urban, but more local. But there's another concept, sub-national, and also some people see city as a citizenship, rather than against nationality. So, and also today we are talking about global citizenship. There are many concepts around the human rights city. I think someday we need to have one whole day debate, real debate, philosophical debate or conceptual debate to clarify. As you suggested, maybe we can. While advise, I mean, this also advice to advisory committee, Professor So, when you develop this guiding principle, we need to also develop commentaries, or guidance notes, all the debate, so that people understand. Because if you go to the UN library, there is a 2 or 3 volumes of the summary record of all the debate about Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And then you understand the different versions, why they choose this word, this frame, that one. And then people understand it. Same way, So eventually the Human Rights Council may adopt, okay, 1 page, maybe 10 articles or 20 articles. So like a John Locke principle, we have a principle, but at the same time commentaries. I think it's very important so that people can understand and then use this guiding principle for practical purpose on the ground. Okay, so thank you for your suggestion. Okay, let's move to the next one. We have 노현수, Professor 노현수. Please.
예, 2014년도에 채택된 광주인권 도시 이해원 씨 같은 경우는 굉장히 추상적이기도 하고 굉장히 많은 내용을 갖고 있어서 이 내용들을 어떻게 보면 굉장히 많은 내용을 갖고 있어서 그대로 우리가 지금 보고 있는 지방정부의 인권 이행하는 원칙을 그대로 쏟아지지 않을까 그런 생각도 들긴 하는데요. 그렇지만 좀 더 구체적으로 강조해야 되는 부분이 있지 않을까 해서 제가 몇 가지 말씀드리면은 첫 번째로 원칙 6에 보면 정치적 리더십과 제도화가 있는데 이 부분에 대해서 지방정부, 지방자치단체에 대한 인권 책무나 역할에 대해서 좀 더 강조하는 그러니까 인권 이행의 주체라는 그런 내용들 인권 보장의 책무자라는 그런 내용들을 좀 더 명확하게 이제 규정하여 어떨까 생각이 들기도 하고요. 그리고 원칙 5에서 보면은 사회적 정의와 연대 그리고 지속 가능성 부분이 있는데 이 부분에 대해서 이제 지자체 협의체 간의 연대 그러니까 뭐 지자체 조직과 기구 간의 그리고 시민사회단체 간의 연대를 강조하는 부분도 들어가야 되지만 시민들의 인권 보장을 위해서 이게 앞에 보셨던 이러한 도시 내부의 인권 보장 실천 주체들 간의 수평적 연대도 필요하지만 좀 더 지방정부, 중앙정부, 유엔 등 이제 공적 기관이라고 할 수 있는 이 기관들이 다층적인 이제 협력하는 이런 협력을 확대하는 이런 부분을 좀 강조하는 것도 좀 원칙에서 좀 필요하지 않을까 이런 생각입니다. 네, 이상입니다.
네, 감사합니다. 중요한 지적. I think there were 2 important points. I think it's also related to the what Professor So is trying to do. Regional human rights mechanism. We have a vertically speaking, we have a global human rights mechanism. Regional was not whole Asia, only the Southeast Asia, partially, and then national and local. So role of these 4 different levels of the governance or human rights mechanism need to be. So that is missing, here. So we focus only on the local governance, but we need to also highlight the role of the national and regional and global. Okay. Thank you for your contribution. Let's have one more presentation. Dr. Shin Hyung-sik, you also present the presentation.
Good afternoon, friends and colleagues. Thank you, Chair. This morning I mentioned the sustainable development goals. Out of the 17 goals, there is need to add number 16 goal and the number 17 goal into the Gwangju guiding principle for human rights city. Especially goal 16 promote the peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Target 16.3 promotes the rule of law at the national and international levels and ensure equal access to justice for all. And target 16.6 develop effective, accountable, and transparent institutions at all levels. Target 16.7 ensure responsive, inclusive, participatory, and representative decision-making at all levels. Target 16.10 ensure public access to information and protect fundamental freedoms in accordance with national legislation and international agreements. And target 16.B promote and enforce non-discriminatory laws and policies for sustainable development. And goal 17 strengthen the means of the implementation and revitalize the goal partnership for sustainable development. Lastly, 17.17 encourage and promote effective public, private, and civil society partnership, building on the experience and resourcing strategies of partnership. So my point is we have to, there's need to add reflecting these targets. Thank you so much.
It's very interesting. You pick up key essential targets for our discussion, local government and human rights. As we discussed, in fact, Dr. Charlie in his keynote presentation, he mentioned about good human rights city examples, Baltimore from the United States, which is trying to integrate human rights into SDG, Sustainable Development Goals. As you know, the SDG has 17 goals and 169 targets and also 231 indicators, global indicators. So now, the many government and also local government, they are in the process of developing national indicators and also national action plan. So which means we also discussed this morning the national human rights action plan, and also according to UPR, government is supposed to develop national implementation action plan, and then another national action plan on SDG. So we have a different national action plan. The question is how to integrate all these, and then. So national government, according to SDG, national government are supposed to develop the national action plan to implement SDG. So particularly following the Dr. Sin's presentation, target 16.7, sometimes the local government means at all levels. All levels means the local, national, regional, and global. And also when you say the national here means sub-national. The UN document, national means here, when you discuss the local government, we distinguish sub-national from national. But here, usually UN document, we can include the national means including local government. We can interpret that way. So whenever we see national, that means both central, federal government, and also the sub-national or local government. Which means these 16 goals, so what we call the governance, democratic governance goal, are very, very important for the local government in terms of access to justice, and rule of law, and public access to information, and institutions, and many other things, which are the essential component of guiding principle of local government and human rights. Thank you for reminding us of the importance of SDGs. Okay, so these are the 4 inputs. Okay, so I think very rich already, and they're very useful for our future discussion. So let's come back to this question. Usually, I don't know how the advisory committee is going to work on this guiding principle, provided that Human Rights Council will adopt resolution in September. As Professor So said, once resolution is adopted in September, then the advisory committee will have a meeting in January, right? You have a meeting every year, February and August.
Yes.
So they are going to have a meeting the next month, August, before UN Human Rights Council in September. That means you don't know yet, right? The result of this one. So that means the first advisory committee meeting will be February next year, right? February next year. Then you need to submit the first report, progress report to the Human Rights Council, September session, right?
The following year.
Following year.
Yeah.
So that means
1 year. We have 1 year. That means February.
Please press.
That means we start once September session has this resolution. Then we'll start the research on February 2017.
okay.
Then we are supposed to submit the first draft by February 2018.
That's within advisory committee, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
then when are you going to present to the Human Rights Council?
19, it's February 19.
19.
Yes, 2 years, we have 2 years.
Okay, 2 years mandate. So that means probably resolution, usually the Human Rights Council resolution give you 2 years or 3 years to produce a report. Usually there's a progress report and then final report.
The progress report is for 1 year, and then the final report is in 2 years.
2 years, that means in 2019.
Just 2019.
Final report.
Yes,
Final report.
final report, yes.
Okay, so once again, so in terms of our work schedule, so September there will be a resolution, hopefully resolution at the Human Rights Council, and then advisory committee will meet February next year, that's 2017, to discuss first this request from Human Rights Council, and then submit the first preliminary progress report to the Human Rights Council September 2000.
No, February 2018,
1 year after.
1 year after.
No. Because Human Rights Council meets 3 times a year, March, June, September. That's why I'm saying, when
During the
so you will discuss the advisory committee February and August. But when are you going to present first progress report to the Human Rights Council? March, June, or September?
It's been March.
The March. So that means, let's say 2017 March, after your meeting in February, you will present a progress report. And then 2019, probably September session, you will present the final report, right? So this is the 2016, right? 17, 18, so we have a 2.5 or less than 3 years, right? Less than 3 years, just to check, Because as Professor Kim Jung-sop suggested, I think there will be a lot of consultation, right? Inviting different groups, but usually advisory committee has no money, right? You don't have no budget, right?
Normally, in February next year, we will invite one expert.
Only one.
Yeah, one expert.
That's
Make a
not
presentation.
That's not
Normally,
consultation.
we get experts from Geneva area.
So that is again the
You used to be Geneva at the time.
because the local government, locals are outside Geneva, all over the world. Maybe Raoul Lugo Institute, maybe you can work together, so using your network. And also this World University can be also a useful opportunity, right? The inviting. Or if you have additional funding, you can go to Africa, Latin America, in addition to Geneva, and so that we can collect as much as possible. I think the process is very important, so everybody has a sense of ownership, so when it's finally adopted. Anyways, it's a financial implication. So which means that I want to propose to Gwangju, or how we can organize ourselves next year, But they haven't decided yet when they are going to have a 7th World Human Cities Forum, either July or September or May. It used to be May, right, in the past, but this time July. Probably they will continue July, not May. That means the next year we can have a little bit bigger workshop, consultation on guiding principle on local government human rights. The annual. So we can invite 2 or 3 from the advisory committee, and then participants from different continents. So this can be one global consultation for you, together. And then 2018 as well, 2018, I don't know, 19, So we have three chances, 17, 18, 19. Whenever we have the World Human Cities, we can have a consultation on progress report and the final report and so on. Just keep for your information. Okay, so keep them in mind, which means we are not going to finish this one, it's the beginning. Relax, So we don't have to come to conclusion. That's what we call like brainstorming, We need to storm our brain. So any crazy idea, wild idea into this one, okay? So feel free. So usually this type of document, first part is context, right? Context. 2016 or 17, 18, where we are now, where is human rights in today's changing global context. Second part is actors, as we discussed. There are many different actors. Central government, local government, and also parliament, national human rights institution, and the human rights, the NGO, civil society, community organization, and also business. So there are many actors, right? So we need to define role of different actors, right? And then the last part is substantive part. What should be the right, so-called right, or let's say the component, key component of the role of the local government, or common. All the actors who are engaged in the local government and human rights should respect certain things. Or like the John Logie principle. If you look at John Logie principle, so it protects. The Morton is an expert on this one. He has been working on this one. So protect and then respect and remedy, right? And then protect mainly the states and respect mainly for business and the remedy is so we can also follow their model, So different, depending on what type of duty bearer and then the right holder. So there are many ways. Okay. So I want to suggest briefly first. Context already we discussed context this morning, so let's articulate a bit, what are the key contexts we need to keep in mind when you develop guiding principle. Maybe 15 minutes, briefly recap, and then we go to identify key actors. Who are the key actors? I don't know, can you use this, Sue, can you use the screen? Okay. Instead of that one, you can show the screen so that we can see what is. Okay, let's do the practical, it's a very practical workshop, okay. And then the last part is, let's go principle 1 to 10. For instance, human rights cities, right to the cities, it was useful for human rights city, but I don't know whether we can keep this one in the local government human rights. So we can discuss one by what we need to keep. One is take out and then put new one. General idea. Okay. So let's start one by one. First, context. We discussed briefly about global context, especially the Charlie. So would you like to highlight some of the key context that need to put into the preamble part? Okay, feel free.
Which document are you gonna? Should I put up the guiding?
No, you don't need to put any document. Just type the key, what we are discussing now. So as a summary. Okay, Morton first. Yeah, briefly. Yeah.
I would basically just repeat what I said earlier today, that I think it could be interesting to have it as a natural flow that we have seen for the last, let's say, post-Second World War. Basically establishing the norm, domesticating the norms, bringing them back to the national level, from the international to the national, and then now the next step, the local level. I think that understanding can also help to sort of say, I would almost say, normalize what is now going on.
Okay, thank you. So ever since the UDHR, there are a lot of global norm setting, standard setting, but now to implementation and institutional building. So this is one of that process, right? The part of that global process.
Sorry, yeah, I would say the first was the norms, the international norm setting, and creating the international institutions. The next step is what we did from 1990 until today, and of course this is to sort of implement it in national legislation. Our courts, our politicians at the national level took on board the human rights language, national human rights institutions. That is not done, but we've come a long way in the last 25 years. The next 25 years will, in my view, be on getting them to where people live, really implemented on the ground. So,
yes, okay, thank you very much. So we want to put this the local government and human rights historical evolution of the standard setting and institution building more local level down to us, right? Bring human rights home. Okay, so thank you. So we'll put as a broader context. Any other context? Charlie, you want to highlight some of the key challenges, global challenges or context? Okay,
In the Philippines, what we think now is, as mentioned earlier, the form of economy, the form of political and economic governance that we have in the whole world is not actually successful in bringing change, in improving the economic and social status of people. So these new complex problems must actually emerge. That's why we have Duterte, and the US might have Trump, because they're looking for new heroes. Because those elite people who governed us, who did not follow the rights-based governance and only thinking about personal interests, did not improve the lives of the people. I think that is how we see it now in the Philippines. And maybe it's actually applicable worldwide. Maybe this is also the reason why we have these extremist groups, why we have so many violence and conflicts around the world. But also I would like to, as a context, I don't know if it's a context or a framework, always included in the number 6 recognizing, number 6 recognizing human rights has specific responsibility to implement human rights-based approach. I think this is actually the framework of the human rights city, which is not the city. I think I agree with Professor Joseph, it should be human rights localities, so not to exclude. But I think the framework is still rights-based governance, and we have to work on that, so that everything actually falls within how to govern with the framework of human rights.
Okay, so there are 2 points. Second one was governance, right? Human rights-based governance. And then the other one is, I don't know whether I can put it, disparity, inequality, populism, and into the violent extremism, all these, how human rights can contribute resolution or transformation of such a conflict or this one, so especially the economic side. Okay, so any more comment, global context?
We certainly could make a comment about international trends such as market fundamentalism, populism, and the emergence of populism and even fascism, as well as economic policies that favor corporations over people, all threaten the establishment of human rights cities.
Thank you very much. Already
laying out those trends.
So market fundamentalism, fascism really go very strong. Like, I don't know whether UN can take up this language. It's up to the advisory committee.
I don't think so.
Anyway, we'll find a way. I mean, we understand the implication and spirit, so we have to put here, but not necessarily the same language, but some, Okay, so these are the key challenges: market or neoliberal globalization, right? You could put that way. Okay, any more comment briefly? So let's collect more. Our friend from Barcelona, do you have any comment about global Barcelona, at the same time Europe, and the global trend or challenges and context?
Yes, microphone. Sorry?
Microphone, yes.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Microphone.
What I think it's important to implement is social mobilization, how to involve civil society in this movement now, because radicalism and fascism it's going in advance, and social mobilization is necessary to implement these rights in the cities.
So importance of social movement and mobilization against extremism, against racism, whatever, this type of positive, the social movement. What about our friends? You're from also from Europe, right?
No, from Hawaii.
Sorry. Hawaii.
Hawaii
You also,
government.
so let's say Hawaii. So,
I'll need a few minutes to get back to that. So,
Okay, yeah.
Thank you. I'm just
okay, Jeff first.
I thought alongside this, all the systems that you have, I thought the revolution and the information technology is something that we should take a look at as a positive part of the context, where people can exchange information from the local to local in a much faster pace, and also in terms of substance. They can really transmit data, photos, and whatever through different digital, internet, the electronic means.
Okay, so how do you know IT revolution, right?
Yeah.
ICT revolution.
ITC.
ICT. ICT, information communication
technology.
Yeah.
The role of ICT.
Okay. Any more comments? The global trend which affects local government and human rights or human rights city. Charlie?
I have something after that.
Okay, yeah. Any more? I want to add two. One is migration and aging. So when you say aging, community care is very important, but it's not the government. Government make a policy, central government, but it is the local government that provide the community care and the culture of the caring for elderly and so on. That's why I think, but this is also economic, social, culture, right? It's not simply welfare, welfare. So in that sense, I would highlight aging as one factor, and also migration. Migration, once they go through the national immigration, they settle down in the local community. So local community, local government has a very important role regarding the migration. So in that sense, I want to highlight these two: migration and aging as one of the key components in the context. Okay, so my contribution.
Can I just add something to that? And probably this is something about the breakdown of the kind of social security systems in relation to the migrants, in relation to people of other vulnerabilities, people with disabilities, and so on and so forth.
So when you mean the national system, right? National social security system collapse, and what is the role of local government?
And the privatization, actually, of
privatization
the system.
Of different ways, some of them because of privatization, some of them because of lack of budget, financial crisis, and so on. So the level of social security is going down or collapse, and then it's about the part of local government, right? Because they are the first front, to take care of the populations. Okay, Monty?
That makes me think maybe it would be useful to have a small paragraph where you sort of bring all the economic dimensions together, because we are in a way in a paradigm shift at the moment economically. We have had the neoliberalistic society, and now we see a lot of the isms that has been named the radicalization, etc. It's already eventually will lead to some of these changes. Which way it will go, we don't know, but there will be changes. So I think that is also the erosion of the social welfare system, is the corruption. There's so many issues linked to both what the neoliberalistic society brought about, as well as to now the challenges of that very society.
Yeah. Okay. So economic social development model. This is important because I see the local government, they are trying to so-called innovative approach to economic questions. For instance, some in Europe, the social solidarity economy, which is one of the key topics in this World Human Cities Forum, and also cooperative, or these days basic income, because of the Swiss, the referendum become, international public. In Korea also, but it's not the central government. Central government is against all this new innovative approach to the economic question, but some of the local, so we will see one of the mayors this afternoon. He's one of the panel video Moton, He's very well, he's the one who introduced basic income policy and become politically very controversial, because central government, they don't like, they don't like, this local government to have an independent economic or development policy. So a lot of tension. So this is also one contested area, how to take care of the population, local community, and when there's two different competing policies, national government and local government. So this is one of the areas we need to. Okay, any more comments? Can you move to the next one? Yes, now you're
Yes.
from Hawaii. Okay.
Yes, it's taken. Hello, everyone. It's taken me 2 minutes to think about it, but just to add to what Professor Karam said, pragmatism. I think that there has to be a way to be able to pay for these programs without getting the cities into the red too much and tax the state and even the national government even more than what it is. So pragmatism, I think, is one of those principles. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies.
Okay. What about the impact of climate change on Hawaii? Do you feel it?
Yes, that is definitely being felt. One of my presentations on Saturday is going to be how there's a local plan to get off of fossil fuels by 2045. So that's a 30-year long-term program for climate change mitigation. But there's other plans in the works for small South Pacific Island states that I could go on forever with. But
because another global challenge is climate change. And as Charlie, but he didn't elaborate much in his presentation, the initiative of the New York mayor, because C40, CT40, that means metropolitan city, they got together to work on climate change because they felt the central government are very slow in dealing with the climate change. But who are the victims? Of course, island, but also the big cities like New York. That's why they want to take action without waiting for national government to take anything. So that kind of initiative, city can take up the global issues as their own agenda. So this is because of global awareness, global citizenship, or they believe they are part of the global solution. So this is also one the context we can put. If not, let's oppose. Next year probably we will have some key point and then we will elaborate more, so we don't have to finish all, so we need to keep some room for future reflection, okay? So let's move to the next one. Can you identify, next chapter is the key actors in this local government. So when you say local government, does not mean only local government in narrow sense. There are many actors, directly, indirectly. So let's make a list of key actors which we need to include in this the guiding principle. The first one is when you say local government, that means the executive, right? It means executive, whether elected or appointed. So and also local government means either subnational or local. Subnational means we have you have a 3 layers, right? Central government, federal government, and the provincial, and then or you can periphery different name, and then local, and then community. In fact, there are 3 levels, right? How do we in Europe define?
Of course, it depends a little bit from country to country, but you would actually today, I think, many places except from Britain, you would start with EU.
Okay, EU.
Come on, 80% of all legislation passed in a country like Denmark is basically implementing EU directives.
That means
so you have EU, you have the national, you have regional, federal, and then the local.
The local and the municipal is the local, right?
Yeah.
And within municipality there is a commune, right? Commune. If you start with a commune, that means a village, right? Commune or village, and then municipal, and then regional, provincial or metro, and then central, federal government, and then EU, right? The 5 layers, right? In case of Europe, there are 5 layers of the governments, right?
That's why I talked about joining up before.
Yeah.
I mean, getting all that to link up is complicated.
Yeah, because each one has a role regarding the human right, right? The EU, central, provincial, the municipality, and also commune. What about the United States? You have 3, right? You have a state.
And we have
Federal state.
we have federal, state, county, municipal.
Federal. And in Korea also we have 4, right? We have a central government. We don't have an Asian Union yet, so we have only central government. and then metropolitan or province, right? Province, and the city, and then within city we have a village, or I don't know how, the different. Yeah.
Towns, cities and towns.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's say first one is the local government as an executive, and then as we identify local parliament, right? Local parliament also very important to play, and then central government, right? What else can you identify more? So we have already three, right? Local government and local parliament. Here local means either regional or local, So we call it, let's say, sub-national, anything under central government. Okay? Can you add more? Key actors in local government and human rights. Yes, please.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would also like to suggest that indigenous groups could be added to this list. Throughout the United States for sure, and throughout Asia, there are plenty of indigenous groups that may not fit within these traditional frameworks for decision making.
That's very important point. So, sorry, but people here in Korea we are not very sensitive enough to indigenous because we consider no indigenous in South Korea. So
everyone is indigenous.
Everyone is indigenous, by the way. So anyway, so these indigenous, we have a declaration. It's a large community. They are excluded from the so-called Western concept of nationality or citizenship. I think we need to pay special attention to indigenous. Okay, so let's have one important category: indigenous people. What does it mean by human rights for indigenous people? It will be completely different from what we used to think.
I would suggest that would mean working outside the traditional frameworks of just federal government and working more or less with communities. I've worked for a little bit with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, which is safeguarding the rights of Native peoples in Hawaii. They work sort of with and sometimes opposed to the state government. So it's sometimes they're your best friends and sometimes they're your opposition.
Okay, thank you for reminding. Okay, so let's go to what are the other actors you want to identify? So internationally, we have a UN global body and the regional body like a European Union. I think we have two, global and then the regional. So sorry, when you say the regional, they have two meanings, right? One is the sub-national, the other one is international, right? So here when you say regional means Europe means international, right? Not global, but inter-regional territory. Yeah.
This is more of a question. National governments would have national offices, local offices. Would that be under the key actors? Because physically they are there at the local level, but they are national offices with a local function, very limited to that particular area. I don't know if they fall under.
Okay, for instance, when you say the national government, unlike the United States, I don't know Europe, but the United States, the police, we famous New York Police Department, police is a job of local government, right? But many Asian governments, the police is a central government. So there are many police stations, but it's a part of central government function, right? But not local government, like the United States. So we need to distinguish, depending on. So when you say the national government, central government plus all their functions at the local level, right? Okay, so it's a question of jurisdiction, right? Jurisdiction. Okay, so let's put national government. I think we need to put National Human Rights Commission separately, right? Important actor. Can we have the National Human Rights Commission? Not every country has a National Commission. In Asia, for instance, Japan, there's no. Although human rights is very popular. Okay, so nevertheless, let's put National Human Rights Institutions.
Or civil society and NGOs.
Okay, civil society / NGOs. And then probably we have to put community-based organizations separately, which is different from NGOs.
CBOs.
CBO,
People's organization.
People's organization.
Can you repeat that?
CBOs.
Okay, first one, the CSO NGO, community-based organization, CBO. And then people's organization. Usually,
people.
No, it's separately. People's organization, usually we refer to trade union or peasants, urban poor, okay? That's a people's organization, PO. Community-based organization usually means, the the village organization, right? The residents themselves. So different from the CSO and the NGO is basically advocacy, but is a community interest. Okay. Yes, please.
Then I would also suggest academia.
Academia, yes.
I think it's tremendous support for, and I think we also mentioned business.
Separately academia in beginning. Academia, I need to consult, I don't know how the professor, because in Korea these days, university, they develop human rights center, but not as the faculty on human rights subject, but the center, because university is a community, right? And then this human rights center take care of complaint, when there's human
Within the university.
counseling or this type of function is a new, so we have one Seoul National University, now the Korea University. I think we can, because, and also Korea University, they also work with the local community, local cities, because it's a research think tank, at the same time providing those advice and service. I think, so it's different from academia, right? Academia is more, academic,
Intellectual.
research, but this human rights, University Human Rights Center is different from academia,
Outreach, more of outreach.
I don't know how to distinguish. Is it clear for Professor or?
Well, yeah, that's clear. I mean, if you think of Carl Center for Human Rights in Harvard, where Charlie came, that's a pure academic human rights center.
Is it?
Yeah, it is, right? Yeah. But in case of a human rights center at Korean University, and also at Seoul National University, that has, as you mentioned, they have a close, we continue to develop a relationship with local communities, and not only students, school members, but also the people around the university. They're concerned with the human rights of people, so it includes counseling, remedy, and also education, etc.
So for instance, now Ulunbong Institute, do you have a program working with the community, local community around Korea?
We have the MOU with the Seongbuk regional district, and then we are developing the education program for Seongbuk.
Okay, so the difference is when you say the academe, if I'm not mistaken, Morton, when you say academe, that means the research for anybody, right, in the country, whether it's a central government, international, there is a role of academe, universal. But when you say the human rights center in the university, which is more service for community, including university and neighborhood, that is different from the academe, right? So in that sense, we can distinguish. Is it clear, Morton?
Yes, you can definitely distinguish, but you can also just keep it together. It depends how much you want to enter into the details of it. But I think having that academic strengths and analytical capacity can definitely add to the work. And I think that's both, you'll say, the very local level, like the Ranenberg Institute, or it's more general. You say that the Faculty of Economy can help the municipalities in different ways.
So, academy in the sense, their contribution is provide the research. We have a lot of theoretical conceptual questions, that's why we need to help from the academic community, right? So in that sense, we put academy at the same time, the human rights center in university is already, let's put together, so that we can further later. Any more?
No, I just like to have a concrete example in the Philippines. We have partners with the academy, and as you were saying, it's on two different levels. The academy actually, we're expecting the government academy to develop human rights education program, not only for the community, but for the whole country. This is how we develop a human rights culture. And then we also have partnership with universities, and we call it human rights education centers, where they are actually dealing with the communities, doing outreach service, providing trainings to local government units in terms of human rights. So it's actually all levels.
So I don't know how to disagree, but we have university has two functions, right? Basically research and education, right? So human rights education is one of the, so let's put human rights education as one category. Yes,
yeah, maybe three: research, education, and then service.
Service, yes. What kind of service?
Like, for example, if you're in a law school, then you provide legal aid.
Yeah,
Or in social welfare, you could give protection service.
Counseling.
Counseling
and
also,
advice.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yes, please.
Yes, I will have
Education.
religious leaders,
Religious leader. Wow.
United Nations.
Yes, religious community has a very special role to play, right? The community very influential. Every Sunday, they sometimes they are going for
Institutions.
school, religious institutions in community. Okay.
And media.
And media, yes, media.
Local media.
Yeah. Okay, so more or less, I think we have more than enough. So what you go to prepare your speech. Yeah, okay. So he's going to speak at the. So
Plenary.
convey some of our message to the plenary. Okay.
Please report on all of this.
long list.
Okay. Good luck to you.
Just for clarification,
Yeah.
Council. The CSO NGO, would that include, for example, in local areas you have Rotary Club, you have Lions Club, you have all these clubs. Do they fall under any of this, or is it social kind of
So
something?
later we need to distinguish, when you say the NGO CSO, that means the NGO engage the public advocacy, public goods, but not private interest. But in that sense, it's different from interest group, It's an association of commerce, business, but they are lobbying for their own private interest, right? So distinguish from this one. But Rotary Club, in between, right? Rotary is a private or public?
Social grouping.
Social network, I don't know. Civic, but not really public advocacy, right? But generally speaking, the Rotary Club is considered as an NGO, NGO, but not necessarily as a human rights NGO.
Yeah.
It's a social service
Charity.
NGO, that kind of, So later on the human rights category, we need to distinguish again, public advocacy, human rights. Those who really engage the human rights at the local level, or service providers and others. I think more or less we cover. Anything missing here? Anything missing? So we have a regional organization like a European Union. That means Southeast Asia is where ASEAN, right? There's the case of ASEAN. And then within UN we have a different human rights mechanisms, right? Human Rights Council, special procedure, but we'll sort out later on. So I believe these are the more or less 90% of the key actors regarding local government and human rights. Business, is the business already there?
Yes.
So business also, there are different types of business. We have a multilateral corporation, transnational corporations, and public company owned by the central government and or local government, right? Because it's the issue of procurement, and then corporate, and the social solidarity, social enterprise. So we need to distinguish because whether it's a pure private or public or mixed. There is a social enterprise or corporate, different. We'll sort out. But nevertheless, we put all there's a private sector or business, right? So they have also a specific role to play in terms of job creation. They are the one who pay tax, right? So we have another guiding principle of business and human rights.
State-owned, including state-owned.
Yeah, it includes state-owned enterprise and private, the mixed, different types of private sectors. Okay, then let's move to the final one. So here, Gwangju Guiding Principle for Human Rights, we have 10 principles. As you see, this 10 principle, beginning part is a more general principle, and later part more practical and procedures. Okay. So first part, principle 1, 2, 3. These are the common principles for all actors which we receive. Yeah. So it's not only the civil servants of the municipal government. It should be common for business, educators, the UN or NGO, anybody who is engaged in the local government human rights. Right? So keep that in mind. Okay. So first one is human rights. Let's cluster by cluster. Let's say 1, 2, 3. Okay. First one is human rights city, right to the city, non-discrimination or affirmative action, social inclusion and cultural diversity. Always the challenge is we need to have a general at the same time specific. So if it's too general, and then it doesn't mean anything, right? We don't need to general one. But if it's too specific, at the time we are too narrow, so somehow we have to find a way, this specific and general. Charlie, yes, please.
I was thinking that someplace within these 10 principles, we should include safety and welfare. Because safety covers so many different issues of, and welfare could include nutrition, housing, healthcare. So I wonder, somewhere in the second bullet of principle number 1, when we have in line with principles of social justice, equity, solidarity, if we should have in there, perhaps there, safety and welfare.
Safety becoming very, very important in Korea these days. So many accidents. And, safety, welfare, and vigilance. Okay. Any other comment? First 3 principles.
Just a thought, I'm not sure if I'm right. I thought that maybe principle 1 is like rights in the city kind of title because it says general.
Yeah.
Doesn't speak very
So say again, what's the
rights in the city.
right in the city?
Rights in the city.
Human rights in the city.
Or can be human rights in the city.
No, we should not use the city,
Yes.
As the Kim said,
Okay. Right, local.
Yeah, automatically we use a computer function.
Okay,
Remove
more
all
broad,
city
broad,
and
broad.
Local government. Okay, so because UN official title is local government and human rights. So local means it can be sub-national, provincial, whatever level. Right? Okay, so local government, human rights. All the word city will be replaced by local government. Okay. So that is not mean. It doesn't mean urban or rural. It's both urban and rural or semi-rural or periphery, whatever, Okay, so that's very good. So that means principle 1 has to be replaced, right, by 1.
It's a general statement, so
General statement.
it's a statement of relationship between human rights and the local government. Local.
Okay, so we can say principle 1 is, there are few, one is a complementary. So we have a central government and local government. So that needs to be debated further because it's not very clear, depending on country, because different have a different administrative system. So some country, local means hierarchical, Central, when there is a local democracy, governor and then the mayor all appointed by central government, that means hierarchical, right? But if they are elected by people, they are more, the complementary, interdependent. So we need to, whether, I think key point is number 1 is whether appointed or elected, they have specific responsibility about human rights, right? This is a key point. Otherwise, if you stress only the elected mayors, we are limiting. It used to be very, very limited, less than half of population in Asia, For instance, China and Cambodia, communal, village level election, But mayor, governor appointed by the prime minister. So which means if prime minister has no political will for human rights, that means all the province mayors, no human rights policy. So this is a reality. So we have to stress once again, whether elected or appointed, they have a responsibility for human rights. Okay? So this can be the one, as a general rule. Okay?
I know that in this first principle that we should include the framework of rights-based governance. Because it's how social justice, equity, solidarity, democracy, and sustainability can be achieved through rights-based governance. And we want all our localities from national to local governments, from smallest village, implementing rights-based governance.
Okay, thank you. I think we can also put, thank you for your, so we put in the general principle 1, the human rights based governance, right? Governance, not government. Governance, because local level we need to work together, you know. So sometimes locally it's not very clear, the duty bearer and right holder, you know, or stakeholder, we all mix sometimes. But nationally it's much clearer, right? It's a duty bearer and then right holder. That's why national we use the term obligation, but locally I don't know whether you can put obligation or responsibility, you know, or mixed. Sometimes we mix responsibility and obligation. So I think we need some advice from the lawyer, you know, legal expert on this terminology question, you know, obligation, responsibility, especially role of central government. They ratify International Human Rights Convention. It's not the local government. So what kind of responsibility local government regarding international human rights instruments ratified by central government? So this is the question, depending on domestic law, you know, relationship between the central and local. Okay, so we can put that in the principle 1, instead of right to the city, responsibility of local government regarding human rights, right? And in relation to central government and or regional government. In case of Europe, EU directive directly apply the local government, so different dynamics.
한국말로 할게요. 지금까지 논의된 내용의 굉장한 틀을 바꾸는 거에서 사실 굉장히 주저되는 부분인데 지금 말씀하신 부분을 프린시플 1으로 두는 것보다 프리앰블처럼 어떤 전문처럼 그 지금까지 논의된 내용의 정신을 담아서 쓰고 그리고 프린시플 2가 이제 1, 2, 3, 4 하면은 구체적인 내용이 들어가는 것이 낫지 않는가 하는 생각을 아까서부터 계속 머릿속에 고민을 했는데 틀을 완전히 지금 몇 년 동안 한 틀을 바꾸는 게여서 좀 주저되긴 합니다. 그러나 오늘 논의된 내용에 많은 내용이 지금 아주 로컬 거버넌스라든지 어떤 뭐 지역의 문제라든지 이런 거에 대한 원론적인 얘기가 많이 이루어졌고 그것이 인터내셔널 레벨과 내셔널 레벨의 어떤 연관관계성 거기에 로컬 커뮤니티의 인권 보장 이것을 강조한다는 측면에서 이것을 어떤 좀 전문처럼 쓰면은 오히려 그 프린시플 1의 가치가 훨씬 더 올라가지 않나 하는 생각이 들어서 제안합니다.
좋은 얘기입니다. So thank you for your suggestions. Instead of putting as a principle, which is very narrowing down, right? So we need to keep that speed of the role and responsibility of local governments more preambular, so we can explain a bit more, right? Rather than squeezing into the, you know, the very legally defined the sentence, right? So let's keep that in mind. Okay, suggestion. Thank you. Any other comment? So I think the first one is the most difficult part because because of title, you know, from city to local government. Let's look at the rest. I believe it's much easier. The principle 2, non-discrimination of affirmative action. I think this can be applied, right? This is a more general principle. Unless there is other opinion, so we consider principle 2 retained as it is. Of course, we will change the name human rights city as a local government, right? So that is a general rule. Any international instrument, always Article 2 is about non-discrimination, you know, starting from Universal Declaration of Human Rights, always, you know, so I think we can keep that tradition, you know. Okay. Can you move to principle 3, social inclusion and cultural diversity? The wording, I don't know whether instead of human rights city, I'm wondering whether it cannot be the local government or all individuals and institutions in the local community. I don't know whether we can that way. I'm trying to think what kind of alternative wording instead of human rights city. You know, every sentence, human rights city respect, human rights city implement, you know, this is the wording.
What we use in the Philippines is human rights localities.
Localities, which means?
It's the areas now, whatever it is, the village level, municipal, city, province, or regional, and even at the national level, but these are actual localities.
There is one way, but if you look at Barcelona European Global Charter on Human Rights City, they have a very clear structure. One is duty bearer, and then right holder. So that relationship. Because city, local government is a duty bearer, so this is an obligation to the right holder, and the right holder has such a right, you know, that structure. But this one, when you discuss this guiding principle human rights city, our idea is, first one, there are always two, right? First one is kind of duty, you know, duty of the human rights city. Second one is action, you know, how to corresponding action. There was a structure, you know. So now the challenge is, we are saying when it comes to local government human rights, the line between duty and right holder, duty bearer, right holder, stakeholder is very low, you know. So I'm going to make it general one. That means everybody in the local community should respect, blah, blah, blah. Or we stick to this one, you know, duty bearer and right holder or stakeholder, you know. I hope I can make. Am I clear?
Yeah.
When I look at your face, I don't see you.
Because when you were saying local government, you're talking of the institution. Sorry. When you talk of the local government, you're talking of the institution. Whereas the city is not necessarily an institution, it can be a place. In other words, people in the place would be covered by that. So now we have to determine when do we say it's the city, meaning everybody, and the institution.
Okay. So according to Gwangju 2011 declaration, human rights city defined as community and process. So as you rightly said, when you say the human rights city, it does not necessarily mean only
the
government, you know, civil servants, everybody, right?
Yes.
But now the title is local government and human rights, not local community, you know. So this we have a dilemma, you know. We have to find a solution, you know. We cannot put automatically to replace human rights city with local government. Local government means functionally the civil servant. So, do you have any alternative language to solve the problem?
But would it also be good to maintain that concept that everybody in that place should respect human rights?
Please, how? what kind of concept? This is a challenge because why title is a local government human rights is a advisory committee. Most of them are appointed by the government, so they are very pro-government except for Professor Saul. That's why they prefer local government and human rights. You know? They don't want to challenge central government who appoint them. You know? So we have to be a little bit diplomatic, you know, not to challenge them too much. At the same time, put our ideas into this document. You know, eventually.
I got confused. You said we would be changing the title from the human rights city to human rights government.
Yeah. So human rights is already, no, we don't change this one. This is a historic document,
Yeah.
of course, living historic document. So we keep this one as a Gwangju principle for human rights. We don't change it. You know? So now we are working on guiding principle on local government human rights based on this one. We are developing, you know. So we are taking some of them from here and then put on the new title, local government and human rights. Local government.
I don't agree on that. Sorry. But I would like to maintain the concept of a community and process. And it's not actually dichotomizing a local government and then there's human rights. No? We want to see it as one. Because we know that governance is actually with the people. No? We have the elected officials or appointed officials, but it's with the people. that human rights governance could actually be achieved. So, sorry, at this time, I do not agree that we would dichotomize that title, human rights, local government and human rights. I think it should be always.
As a Secretary of PARA, you are free to develop charter, local community and human rights. We are all free to develop anyone. So this meeting is very practical purpose. I'm not saying this is the only one. We are very practical purpose to influence the UN agenda so that we can spread out this idea of human rights city, whatever, So, I mean, personally, I like your idea. But practically, because it's a mandate given by the UN Human Rights Council, That's why we need to respect that one, although it's not perfect. So let's have, if you want to really develop very 100% independent, it's okay, we can try, outside, freely among the human rights NGO community, But this is a sort of compromise document, so we need to take into account the UN reality, Okay, so let's put that in mind, So time is up, so let's quickly go through. The principle 3 is social inclusion and cultural diversity. I think generally it can be accepted unless there is any other opinion. And principle 4, participatory democracy and accountable governance. This is also very general, right? Or you can put anti-corruption if you want.
Just one additional word on principle 4. I think it would be good if we could put empowerment. Yes. We would like to empower all the stakeholders in relation to building and sustaining a human rights governance.
So I think empowerment, let me see whether it's principle 9, human rights education and training, education as a means of empowerment. But we didn't use the term empowerment. So we'll find a way, empowerment there, 9. Okay. So I think that's an important, one of
the human rights there holds the value of empowering all stakeholders for participatory democracy, transparency, and accountability.
So we'll put the empowerment. Okay. So it's one of the so-called the human rights HRDA principle, right? Yeah. So can you move to the principle 5, social justice, solidarity, and sustainability? Here the solidarity means between the urban and rural. That's why there is a new concept of sustainable consumption and production, which is goal 12, SDG, sustainable goal number 12, is the sustainable consumption and production. So that the rural area is not dumping ground for all the waste from the urban. So somehow there should be a justice and solidarity between urban and rural. And also this is within the country and beyond, international. Sometimes all the waste from the metropolitan city in the global north goes to the rural area or sea area of global south. This is also issue of global justice, right?
Yeah, we have so many crates of Canadian trash, garbage in the Philippines now.
Yeah, especially from Korea, Japan, dumping into the sea, Southeast Asia.
Would the definition of social solidarity economy be clear enough for everyone? I mean, I'm just raising the point.
Yes, I think so. Social, where's the word? Social.
It's on second point of page, principle 5.
Yeah, social solidarity economy is becoming very popular now. The other conference, UN, also UN is promoting this one, especially Europe. Social solidarity economy is also a hot topic in Gwangju, Maybe you can go get a little more, So I think we can keep this one. Social solidarity economy. It's not socialist, it's a social. Okay, so this type of concept, as Professor Kim Jung-suk suggested, we need to develop commentators, the guidance note, to explain, what does it mean, Yes, please. Mr. Away.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think it would be under Principle 5 that we would also possibly add, and I might be splitting hairs here, between ecological sustainability and intergenerational equity. The theory that the rights and duties that we have today are also something we expect for our generations later down the line.
Very good. The intergenerational equity, which is a core concept of sustainable development, justice, equity. Okay, can you move to principle 6? Political leadership and institutionalization. So many people said this morning, when there is a mayor change and the whole this human rights project gone. So this is a question of the institutionalization and leadership. And educational resource program budget, as a Hurai Osaka experience several years ago. It's not only even Europe. Now the motto said that Denmark, known as very progressive human rights country, they are now very worried about what's happening now in Denmark. Populist governments coming in, and the human rights is more and more marginalized even in Denmark. So it's not only the Philippines or in Asia, it's a global phenomenon. Institutionalization. Any other comment on principle 6? And also with Korea, Korea Democracy Foundation become victims of all this. So let's move to principle 7, human rights mainstreaming. This is a very controversial concept. Some oppose this concept of mainstreaming very strongly, because the mainstreaming means, you have a mainstreaming and minor streaming, right? This is a concept. But problem is mainstream is dirty, So, the idea is we need to bring human rights, which are outside mainstream, into mainstream, right? This is the idea of human rights mainstreaming. But those who oppose to this idea is mainstream is another problem, So we need to clean up mainstream first before we mainstream. That's a idea.
We have to transform, not mainstream.
So we have to transform, and not mainstream. Because in the first place, they should be doing it. It should be what we expect from our government as to be bearers. So if it's not it's not rights-based governance yet, then we have to transform their type of governance into a human rights governance. So I agree, in one sense, it's not mainstreaming, because it should be done that way. So we should transform.
Well, as you suggested, the principle 7, the second sentence is a human rights-based approach. This is the idea of mainstreaming. So instead of this meaning, we can take out mainstreaming and just do straightforward human rights-based approach. That is the original meaning, right?
Safe.
To be safe, because let's take out mainstreaming. Okay, so. Okay, let's move to the principle 8, effective institution and policy coordination. This is a link to the institutionalization, principle 6, but this is a one step further. Effective institution means we have institutions which are not effective. So we have a local human rights commission, we have an ombudsman office not functioning. So this is a meaning of effective institution. Sometimes because of no political will, sometimes there's no budget, and sometimes staff are not competent, not trained, so different reasons. Okay. If no other comments, let's move to the next one. So now we are 3:45, so we have about 10 more minutes. Let's finish. I think we can finish before 4. Principle 9, human rights education and training.
There are two: human rights education and learning. Human rights education and sorry. There are two things here: human rights education and learning, human rights education and training.
Yeah.
So, should we have two types, or should we just say one thing?
So you want to add all education, learning, and training?
Or just human rights education?
Because this UN language, UN General Assembly adopted a few years ago, right? The Declaration on Human Rights.
Education and training.
Yeah,
but not
that's why we
learning.
use this term, you know.
Learning
is a more human rights language, right?
Yeah.
Rather than education. Your learning means from those who receive, the education means those who give, right?
Well, it's depends.
So we are not finalizing yet, so let's put that idea. The learning, education, and training, and then eventually this job of advisory committee, right? Professor, so we give task to you, later. So principle 9, basic idea is human rights education, learning, and training. I think here also you can mention about global civic education, SDG target 4.7, as mentioned by Dr. Shin Hyung-sik, which is, so we can bring the SDG language into this one, so make it more universal, because SDG is a really universal framework and language and concept. So let's put that one, 4.7, target 4.7. Last one, the remedy procedure. Principle 10, human rights recognize important right to effective remedy, which is a Universal Declaration, Article 8. Second one, mechanism and procedures, ombudsman, commission, and mediation, and conflict resolution. These are the possible mechanisms for remedy.
Can I just say one comment?
Yes, please.
In terms of the word preventive, to me it doesn't describe conflict resolution. There must be conflict before you resolve it. I don't know.
So what you're saying is both preventive,
including such measures as mediation, arbitration, and conflict resolution.
So what is alternative wording?
Or just take out preventive.
Take out preventive. Yeah, that's true, because the mediation, arbitration, conflict resolution is after conflict, right? So it's not necessarily.
Education is preventive, but not.
So maybe later we can clarify different stages, before, during, and after, right? But this is not really preventive. Okay, thank you for your very sharp observation. Okay, any more?
And also, as mentioned earlier by Professor, it's very, the term access to justice, fast access to justice. it's really the crux in the community. People really need fast or immediate access to justice.
Usually the UN language, when you say the assess, there are different criteria. Access to justice should be available and accessible, and then adaptable, all these blah blah blah. So let's, instead of right to remedy, access to justice can be more access to justice or access to remedy, right? Access to remedy. So let's find a way. So we can put plural, so different choice, because each one has its own the meaning and implication. When you use the right to remedy, it's very legalistic, right to. And then if you do access to justice or access to remedy, has a different implications. Let's put all, and then later we can put which one is best. Okay?
Did you decide the place of safety and welfare which Charlie suggested?
Safety and welfare?
Yeah. I'd like to suggest that principle 1, safety and social security. How about social security instead of welfare as a principle 1? Because it's very general, very important aspect of human rights.
Social justice, social security,
social safety and social security.
Because welfare is
about social protection and
protection. There are some laws in protection as principle 10, for instance.
You know, this has a different legal implication and also human rights implication. Sometimes Universal Declaration of Human Rights use the term social security or social safety or social protection. You know? So these days, universal protection flow, you know, which means protection is more humanized language by ILO and many others, but general term is social security as well. You know? So we can use exchangeably social security and social protection. And the key point here is, or in the traditional human rights language, right to life. You know? There's a safe. You know? So when you say central government, when right to life means, you know, the death penalty or this kind of extrajudicial killing. But local level, the right to life means safety, you know, because people can be killed on the street, right?
Sure.
Because of accidents, you know. So the safety is also a very important concept related to right to life, you know. Okay, so in that sense,
in everyday life, we need safety.
The local government, the foremost, you know, the first top priority is the protect right to life of the all inhabitants, right? This one. This is meaning of safety and social security, right? So this can be the.
Actually, we shouldn't use that term "right to life" because in the United States, it has a very specific meaning.
So specific meaning in the United States.
Right. Specific meaning means
Microprobe.
opposed to abortion.
You see, this is a problem. So when you say right to life, this is the most essential, basic human right. But it can be interpreted different way. United States means abortion. But some countries, there's kind of the Philippine extrajudicial killing. But here in local context means
abortion, death penalty, and
everything, right? But some country it means safety from the accident, right, or the disaster, you know. So we cannot use this one because it's too much in the United States. Right to life means abortion, you know? So we have to find a new terminologies to make it more acceptable to all, right?
Anti-abortion, you mean?
Yeah. So in the United States, right to life means abortion. Anti-abortion, sorry. So that's why this type of intercultural consultation is very important to make sure that we find a language which is acceptable, culturally acceptable, and politically correct. You know? This is the purpose of this type of consultation. So let's look different languages and to see what is the best, most appropriate terminologies. Okay. So anyway, the idea, principle one is what are the essential responsibility of the local government, you know, without using the term, the right to life, safety, and social protection, and so on and so on. You know? Okay. So that's all right. I think more or less we have done. Right? So we have that the rough summary of our discussion. The first part, as I said, general global context, you know, why we are developing this guiding principle on local government human rights, the political context or socio-economic context, global context, taking into account differences, right? Diversity. You know, Europe, different from America, different from Africa, Asia. So trying to put all, you know, okay? And second part is, who are the key actors? Some are duty bearers, some are right holders, some are stakeholders, right? So we make a list and then we categorize, cluster them according to these three, you know? The duty bearer, right holder, and the stakeholders, because they, depending on their status, they have different responsibility and duties and the right. The last part is content, substantive part of guiding principles. Can you put Gwangju guiding principle, you know? I hope the when Human Rights Council, or when you order, keep Gwangju spirit, you know? Gwangju.
We will announce the
yes, please.
process.
Like a Paris principle, it's a Gwangju principle. Okay? Gwangju guiding principle on local government and human rights. No more human rights city. So already we have another input at principle 1, and then there are some suggestions, and then principle 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Of course, later it can be more than 10, right? I hope you stick to number 10. Don't make it more than 10. Beyond our, you know, the memory capacity. So 10, hopefully 10. All right. So, any other further comment on this? I think very short, but I think very productive. You know. So I want to ask for blessing from our senior friends. Who was Ambassador Park here. He was the has many titles. He is a representative of organizing committee or promotion committee of World Human Cities Forum from the beginning, like a Charlie together. So he is officially. So may I ask to a few words, blessing and encouragement.
Blessings.
Microphone, please, microphone. Yes.
Because I have come here not to supervise on you. I have come here to be educated by you. We all know you are the expert to compromise or in the coordinate the United Nations recommendations and your own reality as an expert. Therefore, I came here to be educated, but it was only 15 minutes I was educated. When I hear all the, that record, what you have worked out, and then I am very sure we are right track. We are celebrating this forum 6 years, 6 now. So up to the last year, we have been emphasizing on outside input. So a lot of foreign important guests are invited. Of course, many of them, they have come with their own expenses here. But from this year onward, we are coming into the very concrete experiences among ourselves. Not only Korea, but also beyond Korea. So I have attended another one was what is the experiences in Spain, one suburb city of Barcelona. The vice mayor has come and then he has delivered his own experience, very valuable. So I'm very happy with my current capacity as a so-called president of promotion committee of this venue, along with our mayor Yoon Jang-hyun, who is mayor of Gwangju Metropolitan City. So thank you very much for your coming here, and then we will be meeting in our official opening roundtable with real mayors and governors from Korea, as well as United Nations High Commission Office, as well as some former Denmark, Denmark President of the National Human Rights Commission is also coming. He will deliver his own experiences. Thank you very much.
This is considered only welcome. Official welcome is here. He's going to welcome officially later, but only welcome. So I want to also invite our special guest. He is also chair of advisory committee to World Human Cities Forum, Professor Chung Won-sik. Could you please say
Good afternoon, everybody. I think that this conference is very, very productive.
Translation.
for translation? Microphone.
I'm happy to be here, and I think that this meeting is very productive for the next step. Everyone, thank you very much.
So thank you very much. So the last, before we leave, we want to also thank especially the two translators. As we know, we use a lot of jargons, So sorry for using all the jargons. I think they find it difficult to translate sometimes, So I hope also good learning opportunity for you. As you are also important stakeholder in this WHRCF program. 감사합니다. 수고 많으셨어요. Okay, so and also we want to thank Odain and those who are helping behind the scene without speaking. So I want to give a floor to 1 minute to Odain to say what has learned so far, please. The microphone. You're passing microphone to others. Why don't you say in your own voice?
Use the microphone.
The empowerment, participation.
I don't know what to say, but thank you so much for cooperation, and I apologize if anything was lagged, and enjoy the rest of the session. Thank you.
So could you please say so over there? I think you have been participating in non-monitoring.
Yes. So this is my 6th year as well, participating, especially starting from developing the guidelines. I think it's always an exciting time for me because even it's been 6 years, it's always a new experience, and I always walk away learning more. So thank you so much for coming all the way to Gwangju and sharing your experiences and your contributing to the guidelines.
So you want to say something in Korean, if you want? Also introduce yourself.
저는 한국인권재단에서 fellow 있는 나이스라고 합니다. 네, 얘기 많이 들어서 되게 좋고요. 공부가 많이 될 것 같습니다. 감사합니다.
네.